Welcome back to Streaming Media East 2023 here in Boston, Massachusetts. We're at the end of the first day, and I have a guest with me here today from a company called AI Media. Introduce yourself and then tell me a little bit about what AI Media is.
Sure, yeah, I'm Matt Mello. I'm with AI Media. We do live human and AI-based transcription for closed captioning, typically for live broadcasts, either sports or news, but also recorded content of any kind. So yeah, basically anything closed captioning, live or recorded, we can handle.
So when I've seen human transcripts during a live event, I've noticed, one of the things I've noticed occasionally is things are done phonetically.
Right.
Because you're hearing part of a word and you're trying to sort of get ahead of the word, and then after you go past that, you don't have time to go back and correct it. When you think about phones, when we use phones that have a certain level of machine learning, once it learns the word that you're doing, it'll go back and correct that occasionally.
Yeah.
For me, if I try to type Tom in, since my name is Tim, it'll constantly try to correct me to Tim.
Right.
I don't have to be, no, it really is Tom. But when you go to transcriptions like that, are the machine learning systems trying to spell it out before the word is uttered, or they wait till the word is fully done, or the context is fully done, and then you see it on the screen?
Yeah, there is a bit of contextual, like figuring out, like, all right, this word was said, this string of words was said, now this word was said. It's going to be this word because I know what was said before. So yeah, there is a bit of that. What I will say is that one of the benefits that we have too is that there's a base dictionary that we're working from.
Okay.
You can go in and kind of customize your dictionary on top of that as another layer that lets you, so let's say it was constantly saying your name was Tom.
Right.
It's just, for some reason it thought it was saying Tom when your name is Tim. You can go in and say, never say Tom, say Tim instead. Or you can say, here's my name is Tim.
Okay, and obviously correct it back through the prior parts of the transcript. So I worked with a group that did speech to text with a product called Dragon, Naturally Speaking, from years ago.
Has anyone heard of that?
I don't know. And one of the things you have in U.S. English is 222, where one could be TO, one could be TOO, one could be TWO. What typically happened in those systems was the base package worked better if it had a distinct set of words. So it worked really well for medical, worked really well for legal, because you had the Latin basis of a lot of those things. Didn't tend to work well for general conversations until it had 10 to 15 minutes worth of the information on there. So tell me how the state of the art has sort of improved on that. If I've not trained the system to a particular voice, is that base library working well enough with a large language model to allow it to actually pick up within the first couple words of somebody speaking, as opposed to having to be trained?
Yeah, so the newer models are starting to get much better with, it has its large dictionary obviously, but it starts to tune into, let's say we're talking about a basketball game, an NBA game, and you have two teams that are obviously playing each other. It can start to pick up which two teams are playing and start to, and then go through the current roster for those, and understand that you'd spell this player's name this way because it's part of this.
Suarez.
Yeah, so it's starting to get more into that, which is part of the AI piece.
So it's the filtering piece that works there.
Yeah.
So essentially it says, I hear Celtics and, I don't know, Golden State. And it says, oh, this must be basketball. And therefore...
It'll do things like capitalize Bucks, right? Whereas in one circumstance it might not, because you could be talking about Bucks in the wild. Right. So it does start to learn those things. And that's the artificial intelligence piece that's really coming into the automatic captioning space more recently.
And where's the typical customer for you? Is it broadcast or streaming or enterprise town hall meetings, that kind of thing?
Yeah, the biggest customer for us right now is broadcast, right? So news broadcast. Lexi's been on for the past couple of years now. Where it struggled a little bit for a little while was things like player names and punctuation and things that sometimes would interrupt context. We have a new version that we just put out that's a new engine that we've put Lexi on, which really started to pick up things like player names and being able to get context better. And then, of course, punctuation being one of the bigger things that helps legibility. The new version actually when let's say me and you talking, it'll line break when you start talking after me. And do a chevron, so that way it's much easier to understand context and back and
So
forth.
the other problem in the older systems was if you and I talked over top of each other, didn't know who to follow.
Yeah.
But I assume the newer language models, because it can look at tonality and that kind of thing, can actually keep track of multiple people talking at the same time.
Exactly, yeah, and you'll see it like line break when I interject with it'll line break and then continue what you were saying after that.
But what if we're literally talking over each other?
That's a good test. We should try
the pundits, because the problem we always had with those systems was all of a sudden it had three words that made no sense together.
Yeah.
Because it was you talking and me talking and we were saying different words.
There's a decent chance it would still kind of do that where it's like you say something, I say something, you say something, and it's like all in one line.
Okay.
I wouldn't be surprised if it did that.
But that would actually be better than what we had in the past, which was it literally would just say unintelligible at that point. Interesting. So where do you said you have a new engine that you've put out there and it's working better with nuance and punctuation and like that. Where do you see sort of the next markets for what you're doing beyond broadcast?
Yeah, so the newest one that's been really exciting recently has been sports, right?
Okay.
Sports has been traditionally held by human captioning was kind of like the bread and butter of captioning for sports for such a long time. Now it's finding its place as it's become, it's reliable, right? You never have to worry about scheduling a captioner because that's always, sometimes they don't show up. There's a human element to scheduling a captioner. And the accuracy is so good now that it's even if it's just a little bit, tiny bit lower than a human captioner would be, it's worth it in the other aspects that you can have it there when you need it. It's more affordable.
Okay.
It's very easy to use. So sports is a big one. There's other segments like government that we're very much researching right now and figuring out the best path forward on how to get into government.
And especially multilingual. So if you're, say, in Canada where everything has to be in French and English, or if you're in the EU where everything has to be in multiple languages simultaneously, that's certainly a fascinating challenge as well.
And we're also researching things like there's sometimes cases where you'll have like English and French but being spoken at the same time.
Right,
so you can't
simultaneous translations.
You can't have just set to English, it needs to go back and forth. So there is some progress on that too that I've seen very recently where we'll actually understand, okay, now French is being spoken, now English is being spoken, so caption in English.
So that's an interesting point from a captioning standpoint. So in the old days with satellite, you had I think it was called SAP, it was the alternate audio channels, where you could essentially flip over and hear French, you could flip over and hear English or German. The captioning, if it's two languages being spoken simultaneously, somebody probably doesn't want to get up and go to their set and go change my subtitles from English to French because I'm more comfortable hearing the French or that kind of thing. Are there models around how somebody chooses what their preference is to see the closed caption?
Yeah, so you can have two separate tracks of closed captioning, right? So if you wanted to have, let's say most of the program was in English, but you wanted to have it available in French also, you can do that with a translation pretty easily and have that as a separate track so that the viewer can decide, I want English or I want French captions. Now what's very new is it being able to automatically detect languages and flip back and forth on the fly as they're speaking it as the program.
And the Hindi movies that I watch when I've worked in India a lot, they switch back and forth in the middle of a sentence. It's called Hinglish, where it's some Hindi, some English, and you're trying to keep up with it because of the fact that your brain is trying to calculate what the Hindi means.
Right.
And then all of a sudden you're hearing stuff in English again, and you're like, oh, my brain now has to go to that. So, interesting. Well, that's fascinating. Thank you for your time, and really appreciate the interview.
Yeah, thank you for having me on.
You're welcome. And we'll be back tomorrow.